Yes, it's the Finnish Football Show. Hi, I'm Mark Wiltshire from Explore Finland radio show, joined again by Mark from FC Suomi and Rich from Escape to Suomi. Rich, this is a special one, I think. Let's start with that question. What shirt are you wearing?
I am wearing the 2018 Ruisku third jersey, sponsored by a Finnish football website called @Escape to Suomi. They play in the 5th division in Helsinki. They've had a pretty good start to the season, and this is the kit that Finland have decided to rip off for their new away shirt. So I thought I'd wear it with pride, even though the badge is falling off. So.
Beauty. I'm not one of these people like your good self that has a wide range of football shirts in my wardrobe, but I'm with you. I'm with you on that one.
We are making them available to buy.
You are? Okay. Then everyone should check out escapetosuomi.com to find out when they're coming available, I guess.
Yes, they'll be on this weekend.
We started the pimping and we're only about a minute and a half into the show. We haven't even said hello to Mark yet. Mark, how are you?
Yeah, not bad. Hello.
Good to see you. Thanks to those that joined us live on YouTube. I saw we had one person waiting, and yeah, already we've got someone there. Alex, he says, that is a beautiful top, Rich, though we did get spanked by a Russian team earlier this week. So I guess that's one of your players who's perhaps needs to put his socks up a bit, by the sounds of things.
No. The Russian team are cheats.
Oh, it started. The World Cup starts in a week, and already the bants has started. Apologies to those that are watching live. We were a little bit late because both of Rich's laptops decided to reboot themselves and install updates just as we were about to go live. So we had a bit of a panic. We're back. We're here, and only 10 minutes later than we were planning. This is Finnish Football Show played, so we'll focus probably mostly on that today, discussing the positives and negatives among the 12 Veikkausliiga teams. We're recording this on the 7th of June 2018. It's in between two games for the Finnish national team, the Huuhkajat, the Eagle Owls. So we'll talk about the game against Romania earlier this week and look forward to the game on Saturday 9th, a couple of days' time against Belarus. But I think we'll start with some recent news. Earlier this week. And Mark, knowing you've probably got some news that broke just a few minutes ago. We'll get to that in just a minute. As always, those watching and listening to the podcast, we want your input. So if you're watching live, you'll notice that Alex has already made some comments there on the right-hand side of the screen. Add your comments, your questions, and we'll try and answer them as we go along. Podcast listeners, use social media to get in touch with us. Our Twitter handles, Mark is at FC Suomi, Rich is at Escape to Suomi, and I'm at Explore Finland. Or you'll also find us in the Finnish Football Show Facebook group. Just ask to join, we'll let you in. And to be honest, I'm more active on Facebook than Twitter, so you'll find me somewhere in there. And I will do my very best to get this podcast out in the next couple of days, hopefully before the weekend. Rich, no noisy biscuits, no F-bombs if you can possibly help it. Let's get on with
my pink wafers for later.
Yeah, but how much later? We'll be talking for about an hour. Let's see if he can get through an hour without crunching.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should have a little. Hey, if you're watching this live, why don't you have a little guess at how many minutes into the show Rich will get stuck into those biscuits? There's no. Matt, we're 5 minutes in already. Okay, recent news. Mark, in the last episode we were previewing the Suomen Cup final. It was around about the time that the quarterfinals had just been played and the semi-finals were over, and the final on the 12th of May was Huuhkajat versus FC Inter. Give us a bit of an update.
Well, it's the first silverware of the season, and it was a pretty dire affair, as the cup final tends to be in Finland. It was a 1-0 win for Inter, which was, I suppose, kind of what they deserved. They have this temporary manager, it was temporary at the time, Pacaretta is his name, I think, if I remember that right. They parked the bus, tried to frustrate and contain Huuhkajat as much as they could, and then I think it was about 80 odd minutes. They hit one counter attack where Timo Furuholm went through 1-on-1, smashed the shot straight at the keeper, and the rebound fell to Mikko Kuningas, who put it into a pretty empty net. Huuhkajat looked pretty disjointed, even though they were at home. They had literally all the advantages. It was as well just when they'd started to kind of get into some momentum in the league. But again, you know, Huuhkajat in a final turned up and sort of they asked some questions, but they weren't really that like sort of decisive or dangerous on the day. They probably should have won. They were probably the best team. They had a lot of the ball. They did create some chances, but I think Turku were well worth the cup final win. And they're also, I think, if I'm right, the first team to qualify for the Europa League in 2019-20. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
So it was a pretty turgid affair. But you got to give credit to Inter, because it was a fundamentally like an away game. They've started the season like in horrendous form, so they're not like pulling up any trees, and they managed to turn over a pretty dominant Huuhkajat.
Okay, and Rich, there was a rather strange news story that you mentioned. We know that the Finnish FA, the Palloliitto, has tried to clamp down on football fans' over exuberance and the use of flares and you know, clapping loudly and things like that. So what happened recently?
Basically, the Palloliitto, as organisers of the Suomen Cup final, Huuhkajat hosted it, but the Palloliitto are the organisers. And because the Huuhkajat fans set off flares at the start of the game, the Palloliitto had no choice but to fine themselves €1,000 for breaking their own rules. They actually did the same thing last year when flares went off at Seinäjoki in the cup final there. So as organisers of the fixture, they're liable. Huuhkajat, in this case, will find €1,700 for breaking the rules, but Palloliitto have put €1,000 seemingly in their Christmas party fund. It's quite high. I suppose it's a high-profile game, but they're normally dishing out fines of anywhere between €300 and €700 for league games. But it's a bit of a farce, really. If they fine themselves, it moves from one pot into another. But it's Finland.
Talking of farce, it brings me on quite nicely to the goings-on at Astigor recently, who have appointed another manager, which means that they've also fired another manager. I at the start of the season, after one or two so-so results, Rich started the Kautanen campaign, K out Onen, which I had a little hand in the creation of, but you started it really early, and I was just keeping my Astigor hat on, thinking, come on, not yet. But you seem kind of prescient in these things, Rich. You called it last year a couple of times quite early. I don't know where you get your intel from. From what I haven't seen many games this year, but from what I understand, it's been pretty. I'll take Mark's word from earlier, turgid stuff for the Kloppit to watch this year. Not really creating very much, not making many chances, and not winning many games, and that's shown by the fact that they're currently sitting 10th in the table out of 12. So Kautanen is out, to be replaced by Alexei Eremenko, which I think is giving people some optimism. Me personally, I kind of think it's a bit embarrassing to be going through if you include Simo, it's like the 4th or 5th permanent manager in about 15 months. None of it really fills me with great confidence or optimism anymore. I just wait to see if anything changes. But is it too early to start thinking that the Oma Asper Stadium might be cursed?
By us.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily by us, but it was 2 years ago that Asikor moved there, and the end of that season was so-so. Last season was underwhelming, and this season has been poor. That to me is a downwards trajectory. So anyway, maybe a new manager coming in will turn the fortunes around. I think so far we've had a 1-1 draw and a 4-0 defeat, so it's not a quick fix. That's for sure.
It's a hard problem. It's a really strange thing because you like at the back you've got guys like Joe Mero's still there. Is that right? Danny Hataka's still there. Jarkko Hurme's still there. He's a pretty experienced fella. So you should have enough fortitude. But you guys leak goals it's all the problems. You leak goals like crazy, and I don't know what happened to Vahid Hambo when he went to Brighton. I don't know if his injury was like one of those ones that's just knacked him, but he doesn't look like the kind of guy who can get you like 10, 15 goals this season. And I don't know where anybody that scored goals for Asiko has been sold. So I don't know really where the goals are going to come from.
Billy Irons sort of last year when he came in, so hit the ground running really, didn't he? He picked up where he left off with Kemi, but this year, and I know from the few games I've seen, there seems to be just a disjointed between the midfield and the forward. He's not getting the chances half the time under Cowton, and he seemed to be trying to do it himself in the way that Alan Shearer used to go out wide, cross the ball, and suddenly realised that why isn't Alan Shearer on the end of the ball?
Yeah.
So he's a quality player, but again, the service was lacking, and I think we've joked about it. Well, I have several times about the recruitment policy of the club, and you look at Hambo. Was it 3 years ago when he signed for Inter, and everyone was calling him the Finnish Zlatan?
Yep.
He started the season off, I think he was averaging about a goal a game. Went to Brighton and got injured and didn't do much else. And yet there just seems to be a combination of and this isn't just limited to Asiko, the foreign players from nowhere that obviously have agents somewhere. And now Eremenko, who's got form for digging up these players from, well, again, the arse end of nowhere. And that's not to say that he's got a family of players who he could bring over if he was that desperate. Not that Alexei Eremenko Jr. did particularly well from last year. But whether his name's been mentioned around. Was his last job in Kazakhstan or Azerbaijan or one of the stands?
Yeah, one of the stands, yeah.
Yeah, and to come back into a club with certainly top 3 ambitions in Finland, I don't know. I know they're in a tight spot. But
as well, wasn't his last job in Finland to take Jaro down? Because Jaro,
I don't know. I think he'd been sacked
2 years ago.
Yeah,
I think
he might have been sacked. Still,
that was the old panic button thing, wasn't it? I think. They were goading VPS, who sacked their boss. They tweeted a picture of a panic button. VPS's new manager came in, backed them up, and then Yarrow went down. So egg on face.
It's the way to do it.
Someone whose time in Finnish football seems to go from strength to strength is one of your boys, Rich. Maybe remind. I think we talked about this briefly in the previous episode about Paul Fahy, who moved from the UK to play for your team there at Royschool. What's been going on there?
Well, Paul, for those who didn't hear, was an English. Well, he still is English footballer who played for Evesham United in, I believe it was the Northern Premier Division, which I think is the 7th tier of English football.
This is semi-professional, working a day job and playing football in as part-timer.
Yeah, and last year on holiday he met a Finnish girl in Ibiza. They struck up a relationship, And I think it was about February or March this year, he decided that he was going to move to Finland to be with her. He left his. Well, I've managed not yet. But he moved to Finland. I spoke to a couple of people at Evesham through some of my non-league friends I know, and when he moved to Finland, he started training a little bit with Ruisku, based in Helsinki. So just to get him sort of used to playing football and everything. And funny enough, a club that I used to still have some links to, Atletico Malmi, they had a pre-season tournament, their Mossa Cup. Paul had a little trial with them, impressed, signed a contract, and they're in the 3rd division or 4th tier in Helsinki, so 2 above Ruisku, and he's I think he played his 4th game from this week. So he's doing well. They've got an English manager. They're doing quite well. He's getting game time and working hard in his day job as well. He's in the hospitality industry, but I think it's one of these stories that it did get a little bit of traction in Finland. I know a couple of the journos were asking about it. I don't know if it got in any of the papers, but it's definitely nice, and hopefully he does well in Finland.
If they both continue their current trajectories, then he could well be playing for Asiko in Ukkonen next year.
He's too good for them.
He will be soon. And one other bit of news before we get into the meat of the Veikkausliiga. I just thought I'd remind those that are listening about the upcoming Under-19 European Championships, which are taking place here in Seinäjoki and Vaasa. So there's 1 3/4 brand new stadiums there for these young players to play in, and teams like England and obviously Finland and Turkey and Portugal and some France and some big countries coming over. So I'm going to be writing a little something about that for Visit Seinäjoki quite soon. And you two Herberts need to give me a few of your tips for that off air, outside the pod, and then I might even quote your name if you give me something good.
Sounds good.
Yep.
It's starting in the middle of July, running for about 10 days or so, and one person sitting very close to me, is going on holiday just as the competition kicks off. So I won't be reporting. I will get to 1 or 2 games, but not easy to get out and watch a lot of football 2 days before you're taking the family of 6 on holiday. So I'll do my best. Sorry, everyone.
But you've got nice few groups in there. The groups were drawn this last week, and the schedule was announced this week. There's some nice little fixtures in there in both stadia. The finals in Seinäjoki as well, so that should be good.
Yeah, so if you're nearby, make sure you get yourself over here and check it out. I'm sure the tickets are not going to be super expensive. You've got two nice stadiums with about 6,000 capacity, so they can get a few people in there with the right ticket prices, I guess. Okay, let's move on to Veikkausliiga. So we're about a third of the way in. The table is taking shape. So let's pick over some of the main points. I guess there's a lot of it is teams taking up similar kind of positions to where they finished last year. HJK have already got a 10-point lead at the top of the table after just 13 games. What about firstly talking about some of the more impressive goal scoring feats that we've seen so far?
Well, Rasmus Karjalainen is doing incredibly well, and he's very enjoyable to watch. I really like watching him. He's a young kid. He was at Kemi, I think, last year. He's at Coops this year. He's banging goals in from pretty much everywhere. So he's not like. There was a bit before Purusoiri went to Belarus, to the Belarusian league, I think he'd started to knock in a bunch of goals, but they were all roughly the same sort of thing. They were all dependent roughly on his pace, so they were like decent tap-ins at the end of a good run. But the Rasmus Karjalainen scoring goals like from everywhere, so like both feet, head, crossing, distance, close range, beating players, and he was obviously rewarded with a call up to the national team, which is good to see. But he's looked really good, and he's been he's been one of the reasons Cups has been, I think, so impressive at the start of the season.
He's a young lad as well, 22?
2, I think, yeah, something like that, yeah.
What about Klaus at HJK? What he's kind of currently topping the goal scoring. He's got 11 goals from 13 games, and Karjalainen's got 10 from 11. So goals per game, they're pretty close.
They are. Klaus looks like he's probably about half a step ahead of everybody else in the league. He looks like he might do, he might do 20, 30 goals this season if he keeps getting the service that he's getting for HJK, and they look pretty settled already. It's quite, after the couple of years that we had with SJK mixing it up and Mariehamn, it's kind of sad to be 13 games in and watch HJK build a 10-point lead.
Where did Klaus come from?
He's Brazilian. He's on loan from Hoffenheim.
Okay.
So I don't know, in the way that when they had Morelos, they had him on loan from Medellin in Colombia. But this guy, I don't know if they've got any sort of right to buy at the end of the loan, because he's here for the season. But I mean, that was the deal with Morelos. Basically, they bought him for, I think, just under $500,000 and sold him for double that. But Klaus, he's come in with just as good a goal scoring record, and I guess the only sort of barometer we'll really see now is how they do in the Champions League.
That's yeah.
I mean, that tournament, HJK start in the second quarter. Oh, they've changed it, haven't they? But yeah, they start in the early rounds anyway. But so the draw for that will probably be in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And as usual, HJK always state at the beginning of the season their sort of aim or ambition is to get into one of the group stages of one of the tournaments, be it the Champions League or the Europa League. And if Klaus is scoring and they get a favourable draw, who knows? But yeah, as Mark said, it's a shame because Rop started so well. They won their first 5 games. I don't think they conceded in their first 6, and yet since then they've really tailed off. They're relying on a lot of young players and loanees, and their boss, who was the manager of Clubby 04 last season, obviously he's got access to a wide range of players on loan. But I think they hit the ground running, and all of a sudden it's kind of right. It's sort of time to bed in. I mean, they're still third, but yeah, after the start they had, I think it's a shame.
I think they've only won 1 in 6 or 7 now. Yeah. Like in the last 6 or 7 games, and it's kind of sad. It is good to see Antti Okkonen's back, like on his feet. He's playing week in, week out now, which is good. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame because it did look like for a minute like they could actually sort of challenge. You know what I mean?
Alex on the chat there. Krista first of all has said Forza HJK or ha ha ha. So he's clearly he's showing his colours there. But Alex has asked who have been the standout players for Rops at the start of the season.
Well, Lapalainen, he was on loan. He's on loan from HJK. He's fantastic, sort of central midfielder. He's scored a couple of good goals. He's very quick, and I think HJK will be looking to take him back and play him regularly from the start of next season. I mean, he's the main one, to be honest.
Yeah, he's only 19 as well. They've got another kid, a Brazilian kid called what's his name? Moraes. I think he's also a centre mid, but he's quite cultured and good on the ball. He can generally control the tempo of the game. I like the look of him. He's kind of a classy guy. But it's I mean, the big question is if they're going to be able to kind of keep it up, because I don't think they have anybody that's really. They don't have somebody like Karjalainen who you can hang your hat on for like a 10, 20 goals.
Well, I've heard rumours that because Alexander Kokko is back in Finland training with Rops at the moment. There's no talk that he's signed anything, but he was their top scorer a couple of years ago, and he'd be a natural signing, I suppose. I mean, he's the ultimate poacher. I think the season he was top scorer, I think the vast majority of his goals came in about 4 games. He scored 3 or 4 hat-tricks. And not a lot else, but he's in Rovaniemi anyway. They signed Tay Taiwo at the start of the season, which for them is a great signing. He seems happy to be there. Very experienced. He did well at Huuhkajat, obviously played a lot for Marseille mainly, but Milan, teams like that. But he's having that old head there is good because they do have a lot of youngsters at the moment.
Yeah, Krista actually says Taiwo's been good, so you covered that too.
Hats off to him as well for going up there.
What about we mentioned earlier that the World Cup is coming up? Any players from the Veikkausliiga representing, or any players representing the Veikkausliiga at the World Cup?
Sort of. Kups signed Abdallah El Said on loan from Al Ahly, the Egyptian club, and he was linked with a move to their closest rivals, Zamalek, and decided that rather than play for their nearest rivals, he'll go to Kuopio. And he played 7 or 8 times for Kups because he wanted match fitness ahead of the World Cup. Yeah. He was virtually a dead cert to be named in the squad. But he came in, he was class above, really, really good player. And when he was playing with Petteri Pennanen in the Kups midfield, they looked really dangerous. You'd think that they'd signed Ronaldo from Kups Reaction. They certainly did go overboard. And the fact that he's apparently Mohamed Salah's best mate, which seems to get, I think it's their version of clickbait on their Twitter and Facebook. It's every article seems to have Mo Salah's name in it. But no, he did well. He's quality player, and he's been named in the Egypt squad. So I guess I'm not sure if technically does that make him the first Veikkausliiga or ex-Veikkausliiga player to play in a World Cup squad.
I guess for this World Cup, it's the closest that we're going to get.
There is a Finnish physio for the Iran team, Mikko Kujala, who's I think he was at the last World Cup as well. But he's in Russia already, settling in.
Okay, we've got some I think some praise here, and then I'm not sure I can agree with this. Andreas says finally a new episode, so he's looking forward to it, but he's complaining that we're not prolific enough, which is probably true. And then he says Forza Vepsu, which I'm not sure I can go along with. What can we say for Andreas about Vasa this year so far?
I mean,
well, there you go.
Good on you, son. Yeah.
7th out of 12 at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, at least the bottom rungs of the Veikkausliiga are already taken up. Stranger things have happened. I think Lahti a couple of seasons ago, Inter a couple of seasons ago, they managed to sort of sneak up into a Europa League place in the last 5 to 10 games. So I think if they hover around mid-table, as they definitely will for the remainder of the season, they might be able to stick together a good run. But there's not a great deal to get excited about there, except for the fact that it'll be roughly Kemi and Asiko fighting it out at the minute for staying in the league. So I think be happy with what you've got.
It's funny because they signed Douglas. I'm not going to pronounce Kai. Yeah. Is a Brazilian centre forward. Tim Vickery mentioned on Twitter that he described him as jobbing, which I guess from Free Englishman is a journeyman or something like that. But he rocked up in Vasa, and in pre-season he was scoring loads. In the group stage of the Cup, he was banging them in. I think he's only got a couple in the league, but they've got someone there who knows where the back of the net is, and again, like most of the issues are, it's just about connecting with that forward. But there's some quality there anyway.
And I've got a lot of time for Seba Strandval. Like I've got a lot of time for that guy. So yeah, good on you.
Top scorer, is he?
Yeah, I think he's got 5 this year, which is unusual for him. He's usually relatively quiet on the goal front, but
someone else has been in around.
And obviously there were two teams left Veikkausliiga last year. 2 teams came up. Very mixed fortunes so far. TPS Turku sitting right at the bottom of the table with 7 points from 11 games, but Honka started quite steady, mid-table, level with Vepsu, but I guess slightly better goal difference. So they're sitting in 6th place at the moment. Any surprises among that for you, Mark?
No, I don't think so. I think Honka have got like they left the Veikkausliiga through administration when 4 or 5 years ago now. So they got dropped down to the, I think, 3rd or 4th tier. And
they went out of business, didn't they? And they took their academy team.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because they managed to survive based on their academy team placing, and then they just stuck all of their basic, like all of the stuff that didn't go to the bankruptcy went back into the academy team that then climbed the league with the legitimately, let's say. But they have like top training facilities, good stadium, decent crowds, good youth system. So it's in a sense not that surprising that they're back up. They should have beat Huuhkajat about 2 weeks ago. I went to see I think Huuhkajat Mossa. They were 2-1 up with about 8 minutes to go against Huuhkajat in Helsinki, and then Mossa hit the thunderbolt to equalize, and I think it was a tap in for the winner in like the last minute. But I'm not surprised that Honka are where they are. Probably sad to say that I'm also not surprised to say that TPS are where they are. They haven't really got. They haven't brought anybody in like of any real note or merit, and they don't have a lot going for them.
Hey, Alex has asked a question here for either of you. He said, thoughts on Dalla Valle? What can only be described as hardly surprising career move, but seriously, anything on what he's like or what happened? He was a very promising youth player, or was he?
I think he's the relative epitome of what's wrong with, let's say, the academy approach to harvesting talent. Liverpool thought they'd found a player. They put him in the academy, wrote tons of articles to the Finnish press, and went absolutely nuts about him. He got called up. He got called up for the Finland squad, and he said, "No, I'm going to wait and see if Italy come knocking." And that was, when was that? That would have been, he's 20. I think he's 26 now, so that would have been about 7-8 years ago. Then he got sent out from Liverpool, like jobbing on loans, and really struggled with the physicality, struggled to gain, let's say, sharpness, struggled to handle the sort of professionalism. Then after Liverpool and the loan stints didn't work, he had, I think, a season or two in England, and then he hit like Cyprus and Slovakia and a bunch of other places. It's really sad. It's like a really sad story. But
the Freddie Adu circuit.
Maybe.
I mean, he scored his first goal in 3 years this week. I saw it on the BBC News, playing Las Vegas Dust Storm or whatever they're called over there.
Sponsored by a cannabis company.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true. But Della Valle, he's retiring to be a photographer. I think his last sort of decent spell in England, he was at Crewe, and he did okay. You know, scored a few goals. And his last club he was at was Zemun or something in Serbia, and he left there last. Something.
Cases.
Lots of Zs, and he left there last November, and I suppose it's 6-7 months. If he's not into it, why hang around? By the sounds of it, or by the looks of his portfolio on his website, he's been doing a lot of weddings anyway, and I'm not sure if that's his significant other that seems to be his main muse or model, but there is a very attractive woman who he seems to take a lot of photos of as well. Have a look.
That's what photographers do, I guess.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to say that we've got three guys in the chat here: Krista, Alex, and Andreas. And we don't always have a lot of people commenting or interacting with us. So I think when they do, it makes a big difference. So thanks, guys. Keep going. And if anyone's watching this, watching the replay of this, I guess, or listening to the podcast, we'd love to have you here for the next live show. Maybe we should be a little bit more active on trying to get people watching the live show. So next time we come along, we'll do a bit of more promotion. But thanks for your input so far. How about if we move on to talk about Huuhkajat, the national team? Actually, sorry, just one question, one comment before we do that. Sorry, Mark, you were just winding up to let go. When we talk about the football here and the Veikkausliiga, for example, is there somewhere that people listening or watching on YouTube can go and get a weekly or a regular kind of watch some highlights or something? Is there something on YouTube? Or do you have to have a subscription service? Just thinking that we talk a lot about this and we talk about players and how they play, and maybe there's something else where we could direct them.
Well, the highlights for Veikkausliiga are on the Ilta-Sanomat website. To be fair, Google Translate, it's fairly well signposted. The highlights are free. They're pretty good quality footage as well. There's commentary. To be honest, it's moved on a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. I sort of call it professionalized, because when I first started doing Escape to Suomi in 2012, most of the clubs were putting their highlights on YouTube.
Yeah.
And now it's part of a centralized TV deal. It's on Ilta-Sanomat and Ruutu, which is one of the main sort of TV providers. And it's good. Yle did, I don't think they do it anymore, up until last season, like a conference, sort of German style coverage where they go around the grounds, and I think they did maybe one every 5-6 weeks or so. But that was that was good when they did that. I noticed one of the comments says about ISTV is geo-blocked. It is geo-blocked for the live footage, but the highlights in the news story are free and they're not geo-blocked. So after the games, anyway, they're good.
Okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So when we publish the podcast, it's on the Explore Finland podcast website, and I'll include a link in there. We're coming on to. Let's move on to Huuhkajat, and I might ask a similar question about the national team coming up a little bit later. There are some questions coming in about Huuhkajat, but first of all, Mark, maybe you can give an overview of what's been going on in the last month or so, and particularly the games in the last week.
Yeah, so Finland lost 2-0 to Romania 2 days ago. That was a pretty drab affair. It's a bit of an experimental squad, it's got to be said. I think there's some big names that weren't there. So Pukki wasn't involved, Hamalainen wasn't called up, Arajuri, Jensen, Ring wasn't called up. So there was a fair few kind of big hitters that have been playing relatively regularly in the last, let's say, 8-game unbeaten streak that Kanerva has been on. So they weren't involved. And he sort of turned to a couple of, like Henry Toivomäki got called up, Rasmus Karjalainen got called up, but both of those guys made their debut. And then there was a fair amount of, like, let's say, inexperienced or players that haven't been playing a lot. Like Sauli Väisänen's obviously he's a great player, but a great defender, but I think he's only played like 6 or 7 times this year. Same is true for Marcus Halsey that was named in the squad. So it was a squad that's not pretty experimental, like I said, and it had a lot of let's say, it needed a bunch of guys that needed hours and playing time to get themselves quite sharp. And you could sort of tell that in Romania, because they picked a squad that was predominantly based from the Romanian league. So it was guys that were playing week in, week out in Romania. And they didn't have a great deal of quality, but they did have a pretty strong work ethic, pretty good organization. Cosmin Contra's their boss, and he's brought a relatively decent approach, like a disciplined approach to how they play. And they dominated the game roughly from start to finish, which was kind of difficult to watch after sort of 8 games without losing and getting your hopes up. And then bringing, like, before the game, Berat Sadiq got called back up. He'd scored, I think, 20 goals in 30 games in Cyprus. Karjalainen scored 10 and 11. Simon Skrab has scored, I think, 3 in his last 4 or 3 in the last month in Norrköping in Sweden. So there was a lot of reasons to be optimistic. But on the night, Romania pressed, closed the ball down a lot quicker. We didn't really adapt tactics, and we looked like a light touch pretty much all over the pitch, which was pretty sad.
Coming up on Saturday this week is home game against Belarus. What are your thoughts? What do you anticipate?
Well, I mean, so Belarus are about a level or two below where Romania are at the minute. I think Romania are ranked something like 32nd, and Belarus are somewhere in the 80s or 90s. So they struggled to a 1-1 draw at home to Hungary. I think that was also Monday night, Tuesday night, something like that. So they're not going to pose that much of a threat. They don't have a great deal of sort of star power. They don't have a lot of attacking intent. They're predominantly built on fighting and on set pieces. So I think for the Belarus game, given that we're at home and that we had a bit of a dodgy turn, we might see a bit. I hope that we'll see a bit of a reaction from the squad, from the team.
Who's asking this? Andreas is saying any gossip on where Glenn Kamara is going next season. He should be in the starting 11 for the Huuhkajat in Andreas's opinion.
Yeah, he should be. He came on, and then 2 minutes later he got sort of done for the second goal. Although there was a lot of people standing and ball watching, so it wasn't specifically his fault. There was a bunch of other stuff, but he did do a lot more with the ball than Thomas Lamb had done in the previous hour. So he's getting stronger. You can tell that, and he's getting more confident. As to where he's going to go, my money would be on somewhere like Rangers. I think they're sniffing around, but
Celtic. Yeah.
Well, that's so. Yeah, I mean, either or. But he's. I think he won Player of the Year in Dundee. Yeah, there's not a short queue for picking him up next year.
He was a Dundee player. He wasn't there on loan, was he?
No, he was at Dundee after he left Arsenal.
Yeah.
So this was his first. I mean, this was his first real full season of senior football. When he was at Arsenal, he had some loan spells at Southend and teams like that. But he only played one sort of first team game for Arsenal and looked. I mean, and bear in mind, this was probably 3 years ago. He looked out of his depth physically, anyway. But now he's gone to Dundee, and it was, from what I saw, which wasn't very much, but no, it was fantastic.
Yeah, I like him. I like, and he's getting bigger. He's getting bulkier, like on the ball, and I just, it's nice to see.
Krista's made some comment about Football Manager. I'm not bringing fantasy football and Football Manager games into this, so jolly good if he played well for you in your team there, Krista. We'll move on with the real world. It's difficult enough keeping track of what's going on in the real world for me. So, we're talking about the Huuhkajat, and let's talk about one of the former managers of the national team, Miksu Partalainen. Now the manager of Latvia, and he seems to be having a better time of it there than he had for the Finnish team.
Yeah, he's done well, hasn't he?
Tell people what he's done.
Well, so he got hired as manager of Latvia because he was sacked from his club in Thailand in April. And yeah, he walked straight back in. I mean, he's very, very well regarded in managerial circles as a sort of tactician and knows his stuff. Obviously, perhaps he hasn't shown that really, but he got the Latvia job, and in his first game last weekend, they beat Estonia in the Baltic Cup. This week, they drew with Lithuania, but only Lithuania scored a late goal. So and that's his first trophy as a manager since he got Cowden Beef promoted from the Scottish Third Division in 2006. There was an interview of him on the Latvia website, which was in English, which is on SoundCloud. I did put a link to it on Twitter, I think. And his brilliant sort of Scottish accent. But I mean, he's clearly gone there. You know, he's got a point to prove. I think his last few jobs haven't gone particularly well, and yeah, he's going somewhere where, I mean, this is Latvia. Bear in mind, they have qualified for European Championships in recent-ish memory, and he's going there with a point to prove, and I think, you know, I thought he might end up as a sort of coach at Ashiko or something like that. I think, you know, no, fair play
this season.
Well, yeah. Well, I thought he'd do it after Tommy got sacked, but they're best mates, aren't they? But yeah, so he's done well at Latvia and early doors, but yeah, fair play to him.
One of you also mentioned the the Finnish national team under-17 girls who qualified for their World Cup competition.
Yeah, they qualified for the finals, which were in Lithuania, by beating France sort of at the start of the year. It was one of these, these underage tournaments have about 4 group stages before you qualify for a final, and they qualified by beating France. In the finals in Lithuania, they lost to Germany, but they beat Lithuania, and then they beat the Netherlands in their third game, which got them through to the semi-finals. They lost 2-0 to Spain, who were the eventual winners. But the way that these tournaments work, they work as qualifiers for that year's World Cup. And in this case, it was the top 3. So normally a third place playoff or bronze medal match means very little. It's, admin or something. But this one, they played England, and the winner qualified for the World Cup in Uruguay. And Finland won. They beat England. I can't remember a Finnish team going to a World Cup who didn't host it.
The under-21s back in 2000, and when young Sparv and those guys, that was 2007.
Was that the World Cup? Was it Euros? Can't remember. But
Euros. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but so that's being played in Uruguay in November or December. And yeah, I mean, fair play to them. I mean, it got to the point where, I mean, yeah, we're cheering on, but Finland in women's football are perhaps at a slightly higher level relatively than the men, and it's been a couple of tournaments that they've missed now, the senior women, and I think any experience of doing well in a tournament, can only bode well for these young heroes. And and I think they've got a decent draw in the finals. They've got Uruguay, Ghana, and New Zealand in their group.
When does it take place, Rich? When is that?
It's November or December in Uruguay.
All right, I'll try and find a link to a little bit more news about that and include that.
That'll be a fantastic experience for them.
Our viewing figures just jumped up, and look who it is: Henry Huck Hakamaki.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah, exactly. long lost Huck, who I haven't heard from for a little while, who is busy studying very hard over in Germany. So good to have you with us, Huck. Welcome.
Guten Abend.
So bloody multilingual. This is such education, this show. And Alex asked, the greatest ever Latvian player. This is the Finnish football show. You want the Latvian football show for that kind of that kind of content.
Ours was Latvian.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Well, I did actually reply to that by text off the top of my head as well. So
and with my Arsenal hat on, Igor Stepanovs. No, he was the worst, wasn't he?
He was pretty dire.
He was their manager, I think.
We talked a little bit at the start of the show about the new. In the last episode, we were a bit dismissive about the new Finnish home kit and the Mother Teresa, as we dubbed it, or somebody dubbed it, but we're a bit happier or a bit more interested in the new away kit. And as you said at the start of the show, it's very similar to the one that you're modelling now. So if anyone hasn't seen it, I'll again put a picture of that in the show notes so you can have a look what we're talking about. I quite like it anyway.
It's had a very mixed reaction. I think from the sort of social media, Instagram, Facebook, and stuff, it looks like a very big split. A lot of people are saying it's too dark because they're used to just the standard Finnish blue, aren't they? It's normally an absolute reverse of the home shirt, just in blue instead. But I mean, this is what football kit manufacturers do. I mean, admittedly, it's a template and that, but you can be bold or bolder with an away shirt, and to be honest, there's been a lot more interest in it than there had been about any other away shirt or most other home shirts, to be honest. And I'll tell you what, I know he's a very handsome man, but Tim Sparv looked sexy in it the other day.
Don't get me started.
Now you've just pushed the Finnish Football Show 20 to the explicit category with that.
Yes.
Oh, for goodness sake, let's move on. Yeah. Keep your shirt on, for goodness sake, man. Mark, earlier you talked about one or two of the Finnish national players that were banging in goals for their club sides overseas. So maybe we can come to the next section about some of these Finnish players playing overseas. There's a few medal winners and a few relegations and things like that to share.
Yeah, so the domestic season in most of the European leagues is done and dusted, and most of them have been sorted out. And I think, probably speaking, Lucas Radecki's probably had the best go of it. They won. Frankfurt won the German Cup final against Bayern Munich, which is pretty impressive. I think they won 3-1, and that was I love that. It's the first time I've actually enjoyed VAR, the video ref, because it was well administrated. But yeah, that was his send off basically from Frankfurt. He's been there 3 years. When he turned up, one of the first things he did was he played in the relegation playoffs to keep them in the Bundesliga, in which he had an absolute storming game, and like literally single-handedly kept them in the league. So from then on, they just climbed the table. I think they finished 7th and 6th. They've become an actual sort of force in the Bundesliga, and they went to the cup final last year, and now he's been rewarded at the end of this season with a German Cup winners medal and a contract, and he's moved on to Bayer Leverkusen, who will be able to offer him, I think, Europa League football next year. Roughly, do they have a qualifier for the Champions League? I think it's at least Europa League football. I'm not sure. Beyond that, Pukki and Arajuri won the Danish Cup, but they got pipped to the Danish title by Midtjylland, and that's where Tim Sparv and Marcus Halsti also picked up medals. They also had Kane Kairinen. He plays there in Midtjylland, but I don't know if he gets. I'd imagine he got a medal.
He did, yeah.
But I think he only played something like 3 games.
He was out on loan.
Yeah, he was out. Yeah, he was out on at the start of the season. Kasper Hammerleinen is the first foreign player to win 4 consecutive Polish league titles. And as Legia Warsaw won the league, and in the Liga 1, Petri Forsell, who went back from Sweden to Miedz Legnica, they won their league and they're promoted. He'll be playing in the Polish top flight next season. And I think that's pretty much it.
Oh, dude, that's not bad, is it? There's a few
Yeah.
wins and a few bits and pieces there.
Yeah, and they're all, I mean, in pretty much, with the exception of Kyrian and Halsti, they're all pretty much week in, week outers. So they're all relatively well established in their teams. So that was pretty good. I think for the who got relegated, Joona Toivio got relegated from the Polish top flight, and Roope Riski, who we haven't seen a lot of in a while, he picked a move to the Austrian Premier League, or the Austrian Bundesliga, I think it's called, and for St. Pölten, and they got relegated. And I think he'd only scored four in 20 or 25 games, so he's had a tough time of it over there.
He's missing Billy Irons as much as Billy Irons is missing him at Ashley.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know what the situation is after the relegation, but I think if Asiko could do a lot worse than picking up Roope Riski again.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people saying they could do a lot worse than enticing Simo Valakari to come back and stepping back in time a couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, he's doing well in Norway, isn't he? He's got Rob Taylor out there with him. I think, was it Tromsø?
Yeah. I think Taylor scored as well on his debut.
Yeah. So, he's doing well abroad as well.
And I think that kind of brings us to the end of this Finnish Football Show. We really should do this more often, boys. It's always good fun. At least it is for us. And we've had a few people watching from beginning to end today, which is always a treat. Let's see. Any comments at the end there before I wrap up? Krista says Radetzky isn't banging in the goals, but he's doing well. Well,
I might have misspoken and said Radetzky's banging in the goals.
I'm not sure. I didn't hear that. Otherwise, I'd have teased.
Keeping him out. He's keeping them out.
Yeah. Huck says that Roope needs to come back to Veikkausliiga. He's a stud in that league, but his time in Austria was really sad. Very homoerotic Finnish Football Show today.
He did. He got a haircut, so he grew up. You know what I mean? Like he's,
source of all his powers.
Alex, I'm not gonna read that out on air because that is a banned substance, not just on the Finnish Football Show. If people want to know what I'm talking about, they have to check out the chat along the side of the video on YouTube. And Andrea, and to continue the homoerotic theme, Andrea says yes more often, please. I think we should leave it there, don't you?
That's what she said.
Thanks to you guys for interacting with us. It's good. Yeah, Andrea says Ashley are doing just fine. Right, I'm moving away from the text. I don't want to see it. You keep your thoughts to yourselves.
2 hands on the keyboard, fella.
Yeah. So thanks everyone for listening to this episode of the Finnish Football Show. We will try and get another episode out before 2 months has elapsed, but no promises. Just a little reminder of where you can find our shows. So FC Suomi has regular reports on Huuhkajat players from around the world. And the most recent article there is a review of the Romania game. I will add a link in the show notes so you can go back and find that. EscapeToSuomi.com. Rich, your most recent article is you hawking some of your old football players. How's that gone?
Yeah, I've flogged a load. It's amazing how sort of popular some of them were. But yeah, no, I've unfortunately been busy doing other podcasts. I'm happy to plug that if you want.
Oh, you go on. Tell everyone what you've got going on.
I don't tend to bombard the ETS Twitter feed with it, but I do a podcast about 80s movies called the Betamax Video Club. Next week's episode is all about the 1982 and 1986 World Cup documentary films, which were narrated by Sean Connery and Michael Caine.
Oh, that's nice. Why don't you... hold on, you can't send me a link to something that's going to happen next week, I suppose. But when you have the link available, send it to me and I'll add it into the notes as well.
I've got a good, nice little thing down on there, and I did my first recording in a proper studio a couple of weeks ago. Went up to Absolute Radio in central London, did one there. So
can you tell us who you were talking to?
Claire Sturgis was one of the DJs there, and we talked about This Is Spinal Tap, and we got a couple of mentions in for Hanoi Rocks as well. So if you're a fan of them, hopefully, something for you there as well.
Jolly good. So find that on all the usual podcast player apps, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Betamax Movie Club. My work on Explore Finland podcast has been quite slow lately. I don't know. I've been moving house. That's my excuse. I've moved house for the third time in 24 months. So we're having a little get together very soon to celebrate that, and that will be the last housewarming party I intend to have for at least 3 years, let's say. Who knows? I'm not moving anywhere. I'm staying here in Seinäjoki. But I have been writing some blogs recently for visitseinäjoki.fi. And there, I mentioned before, there'll be an article coming out about the under-19s European Championship. So keep your eyes open for that one as well. I'll be sharing that all over social media. Hey, one more question, Mark, and I should have asked this a little bit before. I asked about where people can watch Veikkausliiga football. What about the Finnish national team? Has it all gone behind into sort of paid?
Yeah, so I mean, Veikkaus TV's got a decent selection of programs, both like highlights and both highlights and commentary and like punditry, that kind of stuff. And but yeah, the official carrier for the Finland national team games, at least in Finland, is Via Sport, Seymour. I'm not sure who owns it. I think it's Seymour is the parent company, and then the Viaplay app, and then the Via Jalkapallo is usually the channel that they put it on out here. But Veikkaus TV does a pretty decent one. The Ilta-Sanomat website also hosts if you've got the Finnish skills for it, Pallokerho, and Pallokerho is a pretty good, pretty entertaining show.
But nowhere to really watch highlights of the national team at the moment because it's on a subscription service. I think
in Finland, Veikkaus TV, you don't need money to sign up. Like you just give them I think you have to be over 18, and then I think you can sign up, and then you can get the highlights.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll add. I just thought it might be good to sort of share that with people as they're watching, just to give them an idea where they might be able to see some of this stuff.
European qualifiers are on because they're sold centrally by UEFA. If you're in the UK, they're normally on Sky Sports, but not the friendlies. So I don't know. I think the Nations League are going to be on. They're not a UEFA done thing, so they're going to be on Viasat, Viaplay in Finland anyway.
Well, if anyone wants to share their Viasat account with me, we'll take that offline. I know it's very, very illegal. We certainly don't condone it, but you know,
but we know.
But we know it goes on. Let's say.
How do you think I get Netflix?
Okay, that's it. Enough of that before we get ourselves taken away by the old bill. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Search for my name, Mark Wiltshire, or search for Finnish Football Show. I'll get this podcast out in a day or two, so you can listen to this old nonsense again. Thanks one more time to those watching live. Thanks to you, Mark.
Thank you.
And to you, Rich.
Kiitos.
And we'll see you again in a few weeks' time, or maybe a couple of months. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yep.